Hey there, gang. Do you sometimes worry that time dilation is speeding up your perception, causing all the best moments of your life to pass you by, and that you'll end up regretting every choice that you make? We sure don't. Let's play some head games.
Greetings and salutations, everybody. My name is a Zombie Apocalypse, and did you know the name Steve is a hot take these days?
Why would you say something so controversial but so brave?
Because
Hello
that's what we're
again,
all about.
friends and opponents. I'm Jetterex, and I promise you cannot take a single thing that I say seriously. My mundane name is Jim.
Wow, you're right. I'm not going to listen to you this whole entire podcast. Thank you again for joining us today on the Head Games Commander podcast, where we talk about the Magic the Gathering Commander format. Tim, what are we up to this week?
This week, we're going to find out what happens when good cards go bad. We asked ourselves, are there cards that used to be at the top of our must include list that never make the cut anymore? Are there cards that we once considered powerful that seem to have lost their strength?
We each made a list of cards that we once loved, and now we're just going to read them off. Uh, Read them off. Before we get started, let's talk a little bit about this idea, what we came up with. Uh, what what do we think makes a card good in Commander, and makes good cards seem bad over time? So, Tim, what do we think makes a good card in Commander?
I mean, obviously, like, there's a lot of different situations and a lot of different things can happen in a game of Commander. The game of Magic is so huge at this point that really there's so many different angles that you have to try to play on, so there's a lot of things that can make a card good. For me, at the top of the list is versatility. For me, is being able to put one card in my deck that's going to fill a couple of different roles. But anybody who's watched our show, who's watched our Commander spotlights, will know that there's some basic card types or kind of strategies that are included in almost every Commander deck, like cards that clear the board, cards that are single targeted removal, cards that draw you extra cards or that move your game plan forward. But for me, it's ultimately the kind of stuff that we're talking today is about the cards that just feel good kind of in a vacuum without any other support. If you're just in this color, this is probably a good card for you. I mean, what do you think when you think of good cards?
So, like nowadays, I think cards have to do multiple things or fit your
Hmm.
strategy in multiple ways.
Yep.
And like, we're not saying the cards that we put on our list are bad or unplayable. We're just finding ourselves like we just wish our cards could do a little bit more than what these cards are doing. Um, because don't get me wrong, I still play half the cards on this list in certain decks because that's what certain decks need. Like they need this either extreme amount of mana or something like that. So like sometimes I just want to play a really big mana rock or something like that. But
Yeah.
like a lot of the times it's just I'm looking for cards that can do multiple things at the same time or
And
fit
I
my
think we all know, and anybody who's been around a minute also has seen power creep, and we've seen the game change over time. And it is fair to say that the meta that you're playing in, the circles that you're actually playing games in, is going to have an impact on this as well. We've seen this in in our own circles, playing a lot more online these days. I actually, it's very interesting to me to see how different that is than having kind of an LGS situation where maybe you're seeing the same decks every week.
yeah.
So that really contributes to what makes a card good. We did, had a whole conversation about how spell table impacts the choices that we make in our cards, because we don't really want to play cards that are tough to play over spell table just because it makes the game harder to play and less fun for everybody.
Right.
So all those things can factor into what makes a card good. And again, just to reiterate, what we're talking about today is cards that were just very like kind of auto include status for us at some point that maybe don't have that anymore for any number of reasons. And I think we'll go into a little greater detail about why we picked each card. Um, So keeping that in mind, how do you think that how do you think it's changed over time, the way that we consider the strength of cards?
Well, so I think power creep has a lot to do with what we do, with a lot of my decisions. Like the there's just strictly better versions of these cards sometimes, and of course I'm gonna play those. And like with the format speeding up more than, because back in the day, turn one, two, and three doing nothing was okay. Nowadays, doing nothing on turn three feels like by turn three feels bad. Like just actively
It
bad.
does. What a good point. Like commander games just generally speaking feel like they've been a little bit faster. And I mean just in case there's anybody listening to our podcast about commander that doesn't understand what power creep means. It is this general term that in order to make the game competitive and in order to constantly be printing new cards that keep the game interesting, what we have seen over time is some cards printed that are strictly better than an older card in every way. So it kind of makes this old card completely useless in formats such as Commander, where you have this very set pool of cards to pick from. So, and this has happened in some pretty profound ways over the course of a long time, actually, where we see a generic card now printed at the common level of rarity that is in every way better than all of the commons printed, in years before it. But this happens in Commander quite a lot, where you'll find something that is very popular, but just has something printed that does what it does better and completely removes that other card from consideration.
Right. So there's really nothing you can do in the now to say, oh well, will this card be bad in the future? Because you don't know
Yeah.
what Wizards is going to print unless that they hire me,
Mhm.
Wizards. I know we talk about this every week, but I'm waiting for your letter in the mail saying, Steve, you have the job. Come work for us. Like I'm still waiting for it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then I would
What are we
know.
waiting for?
Then I would know what would be good in 2 years because they're kind of ahead on times. So uh, I I think now would be a good time for Tim to go into your first card on our list.
I thought my name was Jim. No, you're right. You're right. I can't
Oh,
can never
see,
remember.
remember, I'm not
And
listening to you today.
that's right. Don't pay any
So
attention to anything that I say.
right. So
So the first card on my list was, in fact, the very first card that came to mind. And I'm just going to reemphasize before we dive into the cards. We are by no means saying these are bad cards. We are by no means saying that you can't find the perfect spot for this card, because I think every card on our list has the perfect deck. Like, it's out there. These are not unplayable. These are very playable cards. These are just things that we played a lot in the past, not so much anymore. First one on my list is Sun Titan.
whew,
This is 4 and 2 white. It's a 6/6 vigilant. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So when I said, what do I like in a card? What makes a card good? Repeatable value, pretty high at the top of my list. Is this card good in a vacuum? The only thing it really needs to be good is stuff in your graveyard that it can bring back onto the battlefield. And in formats that have lands that puts himself in the graveyard, and we don't even have to talk about fetch lands, we can just talk about Evolving Wilds. Evolving Wilds would be perfectly fine. Repeating that turn over turn over turn, where you could continue to pull a basic out of your deck.
seems
Great
great.
value, no question. Lots of other targets for Sun Titan. So for me, this one has just been, it at some point was it went into every white deck I could possibly fit it into, and I have found that it is just too expensive, and that at that stage of the game, when I get to 6 mana, it just doesn't, it seems like I could be doing other things with that six
Right.
mana other than just trying to get a little value engine going. So over time, I have really seen this card decline when I'm building a deck list and I'm looking at whether or not this is going to go in there. This one does not make the cut as much as it used to.
Yeah, I think this is actually like a prime example of what we're talking about. Because like in a blink deck, this card's great because then you're getting your other blink value. You're getting multiple triggers because you're going to double them with Panharmonicon or any other like spell like that of the sort. I just think like when it comes to 6 mana, I want to do more. Like I want my
Yep.
it to be game threatening, or also like this is like just generic value where I want my card in my deck to be not necessarily generic. I want it to be more towards the theme of the deck. So having just generically good cards doesn't feel as well as a card that will help further my game plan.
I think that's a great point. Like that at this level, you really like, yes, this is generically good, but you want something specifically good. You want something that is definitely that you know for sure is going to align with what your commander is doing or is moving your game plan forward, is getting that incremental one extra land each turn, good on turn 6, 7, 8. Not as good as it used to be because most of the time we're doing that stuff earlier in the game. That I definitely had. Excuse me. Had a deck recently where I included this because it was a blink deck and this was a fantastic target for that. But again, because it was so expensive, I felt like I never got to it. I felt like I was too busy doing things with what was already on board that I just never had the 6 mana to commit to this. So
I actually have a list that's
remarkable.
perfect for this card. So my cycling deck
Okay.
is perfect for this
Right.
because like when I cycle things, I'm putting things into my graveyard and most of them are going to cost less than 3. It also has a sub enchantment type thing. So like if one of my enchantments, especially like Astral Slide or something like that, which happens to cost 3, so now I play this, get the keystone of my deck from my graveyard. Like it's a more of a protection piece than like a value engine almost, because it's protecting the pieces that I need that just happen to cost less than 3. So like in my cycling deck, this card's perfect and I will never take it out. You can never tell me otherwise. But
Right.
there's
But
other
otherwise,
decks.
generic white, yeah. But generic white decks, like, are they all gonna get this one? It's just, I mean, Sun Titan, we love you, but we're just not gonna see each other as much as we used to.
I know. I think I lost his phone number somewhere. Got a new phone recently.
All right, what's your first card?
All right, my first card is a card that I love, and I remember when it came out, it was like, I mean, honestly, when it came out, it just wasn't good because Commander wasn't a thing. But the card I'm talking about is Gilded Lotus. It is a 5 mana artifact, and it just taps to add 3 mana of any one color. Great card. It used to be a staple because, like, how I used to evaluate this card is, well, I paid 5 mana, I get +1 mana by the next turn. So, like, I'm getting 6 mana in 2 turns, which I thought, hey, that's great because it's already paid for itself, and I'm up 1 mana on top of all of this. But
Right.
but on turn 5, I want to do more. Now I have a deck with this card in the list. It's in my Runo Stormkirk deck, and that's because I run big scary Krakens, and sometimes I need to be able to just power them out. So like I will on turn 3 or turn 2 play a ramp spell, turn 3 play either Thran Dynamo or Gilded Lotus to just be able to then power out as many Krakens as possible. So sometimes, like in an artifact themed deck where you're untapping it multiple times or something along those lines, where this card's going to go good. But like Gilded Lotus used to be like a $20 card because it was just going in everyone's commander decks, and now it's sitting at $1.54. Now it has been printed a significant number of times, but like it just fell
I
off the
think there's
wayside.
something to that. Our first two choices both have that in common, where they have been printed in Commander Precons a whole bunch of times. And I think that that illustrates this point really well, that these cards were at some point Commander staples, but they have since attacking the
Cattail.
Bean Bean. Cattail. but they've been reprinted so many times now, and they become so ubiquitous in terms of availability that they are inexpensive to purchase, but also that tells us like what Wizards thinks about these cards in terms of their like secondary market value, and they're like not worried about these cards being cheap on the secondary market because it's like, well, they're not actually, they're not that high powered,
Right.
but they
They
just
used to be.
were this was right where you wanted to be in a lot of cases.
Right. Man, I still love this card though. I love being able to just
Yeah.
be like, "Here, 5 mana. I have 3 more to cast another ramp piece. So the next turn, I'm sitting at like 5 bajillion mana because I love big mana stuff. So sometimes it just works. Alrighty, Tim. I think we talked enough about Ghetto Lotus. I gushed over it enough and cried a little bit in my Gatorade because I miss it so much. But what's the next card?
Next card on my list is Courser of Kruphix. This is 1 and 2 green for an enchantment creature centaur. It's a 2/4. You play with the top card of your library revealed. You may play lands from the top of your library, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. So this was, similarly to my first pick, a fantastic value engine of a bygone era. There was a time where this at 3 mana meant you were going to hit your land drops for the rest of the game. You can do super fun things with fetch lands. If you have multiple land drops, it makes it even better. But even in landfall decks, I feel like this doesn't necessarily make the cut anymore. There's just other things in the 3-drop spot that produce a more profound effect, and this slowly but surely became less and less impactful over time. Has that similar quality that we just talked about with the other cards, where they've reprinted it a number of times and it isn't as valuable as it once was either. But for me, this was an auto include in any green deck that I was playing. But lately, it just really hasn't been making the cut.
Yeah, I think it just doesn't do enough, right? Like, because like if it also like I'm gonna compare this to Oracle and Multiire, right? I still
Sure.
think Oracle could go on this list. Like Oracle and Moldiah, don't get me wrong, great card. But like landfall decks don't want it. They would rather have, something that just puts the lands into play immediately in order to get like they would rather run like a Kadama's Reach or something, or a Cultivate over something like this, or Explosive Vegetation, or something that puts multiple lands into play at the same time. And I just don't think like the almost potential card draw that you get from it is enough. Like
Yeah.
if it said play an additional land, like Dryad Daddy is what I like to call him. But Dryad of Elysian Groves for those people who don't know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
I think Dryad killed this card.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
do. Like Dryad is also an enchantment creature. It costs 2 and a green instead of 1 and 2 green, so it's easier on the mana base. It's got, I think, the same stats. I think it's also a 2/4, but it gives you an extra land drop every turn, makes all your lands all the types, so it smooths out your mana base by itself as well. And an extra land drop every turn really snowballs over time. And so it hits a lot of the same markers, even in a dedicated enchantment deck. I think that you would find, if you match this up against all the other things, all the other options that you have
Mhm.
at the 3-drop spot, this might not make the cut anymore, which
Right.
is just remarkable to me because it really was such a pitch perfect value engine at some point. And I really loved this card. I really loved this card. Played it in standard when it happened, when it first came out, and I really was fond of it. And it just, there's so many different options that I think ultimately make this one not look as strong anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I like even back in the day, like I didn't look at the Corsair Crew Fix as much because, like, again, it doesn't give you that extra land drop. That like being able to play a land from somewhere else is kind of nice, but it only works some of the time. Where like I would rather just draw a whole bunch of cards and have additional land drops. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Dryad of Elysian Grove absolutely obliterated that centaur, and he will forever be missed.
All right, what's your second card?
So my second card is what used to be a boogeyman of the Commander format way back when it first came out. And the card I picked is Kalia the Vast. Okay. It's a 1 and Mardu for a 2/2 human cleric with flying. Whenever Kalia the Vast attacks an opponent, you may put an angel, demon, or dragon creature card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped and attacking that opponent. Um with the power creep of removal being so like much better, like the threat of Kalia isn't as bad as it used to be. Because yeah, you're gonna put a pair of boots on it, but like everyone's gonna have like just the abundance of swords and swords of plowshares, path to exiles, assassins trophies, like, and the list can go on for days of 1 or 2 mana spells that just says no Kalia, no you don't. Just basically made the deck not worth what it used to be. Can Kalia still do things?
Fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, the removal's just too good now.
You think that's it, huh?
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue with it because I cannot remember playing against this commander. Certainly not in the recent years. I vaguely remember some tabletop play with this back when we had like 6 people around a table playing a ridiculous commander game. I think there was a Kalia deck there, but here we have this, reprinted in Modern Horizons 3. Like, still it's iconic, no question. And with all the angels, demons, and dragons that have been printed since, you would think that I wonder, is this a case of this one is just so well known at this point that it's got a reputation greater than its actual danger, and so it's like the Black Widow spider that just gets smashed for being what it is, without actually assessing how much danger it really is. I never really clocked until this moment that it's only a 2/2. That shock kills this card.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it. Like just the reputation that Kalia has, kinda, even if people are playing against it, they're gonna be like, oh well, I know what you're gonna do. You're gonna play Kalia, get a fat angel, and then destroy all the lands. Because that's generally the play pattern of Kalia the Vast. In fact, I had a game with it probably like a year or a year and a half ago, and I'm playing my Lord Windgrace deck, and this person got Kali out and then destroyed all the lands. I also had Bride of Elysian Grove out, I had a Crucible out, and I had Lord Windgrace out. And I'm like, are you sure this is what you want to do?
Are you sure?
He's like, I need to slow you down. I was like, no, you just won me the game. Thank you. Like,
you just slowed everybody else down.
Like, you just stopped everyone else from stopping me.
Yeah.
So, like,
wow.
Yeah, it's, I don't know. It just doesn't seem as scary as it once was. Like, because it used to be CDH, and like as I said, the format's faster now. So, like, the play pattern usually was turn 1, do something, turn 2, a ramp piece, turn 3, Kalia, turn 4, you're attacking. Or you do like 1, 2, 3, do something, usually play a pair of boots, and attack on 4 with Kalia. So, right. Why do all that when you can just ramp into a really scary angel on turn 4 instead? Like, I think it's not necessary. Like, cheating in, like, you can barely play these dragons on turn 4 or demons or whatever.
Right. I'm interested. I'm interested to see what the listenership has to say about this one, because as I said, I haven't seen this card in forever. So, I mean, I trust trust your insight here. I'm just very curious to know what everybody else has to say about this. Is this a commander that is still as dangerous as it once was? Or
it used to be CDH.
Or is removal too strong? Yeah.
And now, like, I would love to hear from the CDH crowd and say, hey, is this a commander that you see in CDH anymore? Because I
Yeah.
doubt it is.
Fascinating.
All right, Tim. We've bashed Kalia to the graveyard and she'll never come back. So please tell me what your third card is.
My third card is Burgeoning. It is a 1 green enchantment that reads, whenever an opponent plays a land, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So, listen, haters, I know it's a good card. I know that it's a strong card. I stopped playing it because I played a lot of casual tables, and in a lot of green decks, playing Burgeoning on 1 means I dump the other 2 lands in my hand, and then it doesn't do squat ever again. So, is that good enough? Is playing a 1 mana spell that lets me dump the 2 cards that are in my hand into play, the other 2 lands out? It hasn't seemed to have been. I play it, I get all my lands out, my hand is cut in half, and then I don't really go off in as powerful a way. I know that there's fantastic places for this decks that are drawing a whole bunch more cards and end up with a bunch of extra lands in their hand. I think there's at least one deck that I have that still plays with this card for that reason, because the deck ends up drawing an enormous amount of cards and I needed something to do with them. But I used to have like 3 or 4 copies of this, and is it in every green deck that I play? Not anymore. There were lots of places where it just was not doing what I wanted it to do. I felt strongly that Exploration was better in this spot.
I think Exploration is better in 100% of the case anyway. So let me, like, I agree with everything you said, and I actually like specifically looking at like my Windgrace deck. Like, I found myself not like after Burgeoning came out that I don't have enough cards in my hand to play it, and like drawing this on turn 7 or 8, it's dookie. Exploration, at least, if you're drawing more cards, you're still getting more. So,
right.
And then you're not relying on other people to do things that you want to do anyway. So, I don't like relying on other people to do what I want to do.
I think your Windgrace deck is a great example of when this card it like seems like it should go in that deck and doesn't, because you want to do all of the things on your turn. You want to play all of the lands on your turn. That deck is so capable of cycling through lands and kind of getting this, what do you used to call it, the land dance, right?
The land dance, yeah.
You're not waiting for your opponent to play lands to get that dance going. You're doing it all of your own power. So this card just doesn't line up with that strategy and ends up being a card that does practically nothing in that scenario. And again, of course, are there decks that this is just perfect for? Of course, they're out there.
Mainly, I think this goes good in like a Chantress style decks where, where you're going to be drawing every card you play. You're drawing a card, or like, if your commander says when a land enters the battlefield, you draw a card. This is a dead giveaway because you're going to be refilling your hand with the cards that you're playing. But like, we're talking about 2 types of deck over the thousands of different types of decks that you can have out there. So I don't think this card's good. I think it's actively bad 90% of the time, because a lot of people are going to see it turn 1 and they're like, oh, I get to have 4 lands, but like, even so, let's just put it into perspective. Let's look at it from a turn 1 and you have 4 lands and a Burgeoning, right? So that's 5 of your 7 cards. So on turn 2, you have 4 mana and 2 cards in your hand. What are you doing? You're not going to be doing much.
Is what most people would say, right? But I've been in that exact scenario that you're describing a number of times, and so if your commander isn't drawing you extra cards at that point, or isn't just having a huge impact, if it's something that's more kind of combo built or built to get value over time. yeah, you're not doing anything with this card. So now I will say this card went back up in value recently and
Yeah, I
is over
noticed that.
$20 in value, which is surprising to me. But I think that this is probably the thing. I think that this may still be pretty great in CEDH. I don't really know because it's not some format that I'm overly familiar with. But again, the message here is not this is a bad card. This is just I used to play this card as a lot. I have found that there's been a lot of places where it just didn't do where I wanted what I wanted it to do, and I'm playing it way less these days. So
Yep.
burgeoning, thank you for our time together. Maybe we can just be friends.
Yeah. Oh, that. Oh God, you just friend zoned
What
burgeoning. That hurts.
what's your next card?
So this is a card that I never really played because I never liked the play pattern that this card did. But this used to be the I win button for a lot of red decks back in the day, and now it's just like, eh. The card I'm talking about is Insurrection. It is a 8 mana, 5 and 3 red sorcery. It says untap all creatures and gain control of them until end of turn. They gain haste until end of turn. Um, Honestly, like it just doesn't like stealing all like it doesn't kill everyone most of the time. And if I'm
Sure.
spending 8 mana, I want to kill everyone. I want to and like the floor to this card says I do nothing.
Right. If there are no creatures on board, this card does
Because
absolutely nothing.
what's the play pattern that I've noticed that on turn 6 or 7 the board gets wiped. What happens after turn 6 or 7? You have generally 7 or 8 mana. What is Insurrection doing when right after the board gets wiped? Absolutely nothing. There's too much
And in your
good.
hand, yeah.
It's too much good board wipes. There's too many good like the interaction of play has been getting better and better. So like there's not as many creatures sitting on the table as there used to be. And with everyone playing more efficient cards, the creatures aren't as big. They're doing things that their decks want to do, and they're not just generally good creatures. So you're not finding yourself with like, oh, I'm casting Insurrection. I have 60 power worth of stuff on the board, and now I'm killing people with it. It doesn't seem to be happening as much as it used to. So yeah, I think this card's not bad. It's just not what it used to be.
Yeah, can't remember the last time I saw this card either. It's a good example, not necessarily one that you or I play very often, but that you used to see fairly regularly that seems to have fallen out of favor for that reason. 8 mana feels like a lot.
It does.
Like I can't off the top of my head, red's not a color that I really dip into all that often. I do have decks with red in them, but they're almost
Mm.
never the primary color. But yeah, this is a tough one. Can't even cannot remember seeing this card.
I'm trying to think of the last few games that we played, and would have Insurrection won me the game? I think the answer is no.
Sure depends on the game, but like won the game as in killed all three people. I think you're
Or
onto it.
whoever's
Like if
left.
right, if the board is so big at that point, like I think what happens a lot is if you do have like big scary creature armies, like you usually win in that turn.
Right.
But I guess I mean there's something to it. Now I want to play it.
Yeah, like I so the reason why I brought this card up specifically, like a while back I went back and just like listened to like real old Command Zone stuff, and they would bring up Insurrection all the time, and then they just stopped talking.
Fascinating. Yeah.
So like it's just like when you notice content creators stop talking about certain cards, there's a reason why.
Yeah. That's fair.
So yeah, Insurrection, not a great card anymore. Like I don't think anyone will argue with us in the comments about that. So Tim, what's your next card?
All right, so my next card is Brainstorm. This is a 1 blue instant. Draw 3 cards, then put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order. So again, this is a card that I think a lot of folks might auto include if you have blue in your color identity. And I really think everyone should reconsider whether or not this makes sense for their deck. And I say that as someone who would traditionally just automatically include this card. And I have had lots of decks with blue in the color identity that this just had no place for. You get to see more cards, sure, but if you're not able to manipulate them in some other way, if you have fetches and you can fetch those cards away, great. But if you don't, you're really just
It's a trap.
delaying those other card draws. Yeah.
Oh, this card. I think they should rename this card to Admiral Akbar because it's a trap. So
Sure.
because okay, that was a stretch, but I thought it funny. Anyway, so like this card does amazing in 60 card formats because they're
Sure.
playing with the crazy amount of fetches. They're playing with other things that make this good. Now, I will say this card is amazing if your deck is worried about how many cards you're drawing or what the card on the top of your library matter. So like a perfect
Absolutely.
card with this is Alhemmer's Archive because it says 1 mana, draw 6 cards, put 2 back. That's not a trap. But if your card's not wanting Alhemmer's Archive or the Teferi's Ageless Insight or something like that, where it's an enchantment that does the same
That's
thing.
right.
Yeah. Like if you're not wanting to play those cards, Brainstorm isn't want to be it. Like if you don't care what the top of your library looks like or whatever, then you're not looking to play this card.
Yeah, I would argue that Opt might
Opt is
even
so
be a
much
little
better.
better.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
In a lot of situations. So again, Brainstorm's obviously good. I have a Hidetsugu and Kyrie deck. Hidetsugu and Kyrie Brainstorms on ETB. I mean, it's part right there in the command zone.
Yeah.
So having this as another way to do that is great for that deck because it wants top deck manipulation. I definitely want to take cards from my hand and put them back on top of my library. It's perfect. But that's it. It's the only blue deck I have that has this card in it because it is uniquely good there. But I think that this is a good example of a card that at one point everybody felt it was so generically strong. I felt that it was so generically strong that I'd automatically include it. And then over time, I realized if it is not synergizing with the general strategy in a meaningful way, there might be a better option now.
Yeah, I think we talked enough about Brainstorm. I think it's time that we go
Yeah.
into my next card, and it kind of is in this same vein, maybe, but like Divination. It's a 3 mana sorcery that says draw 2 cards.
Yep.
That's all it does. Like in my card draw spells, I want. First of all, there's just strictly better versions of this. They have an instant that just got printed not too long ago. Don't know the name of it.
Quick stuff.
Cards right over here somewhere, whatever. However, this cards just doesn't do enough. It really doesn't.
And again,
Harmonize.
There was a time where if you were in blue, you'd put this right in there. And I think Harmonize probably fits in this mold as well.
Mold Drifter, I think fits here too. Like just 3 mana to draw, like get an additional card because like if you think about it, like this card only nets you 1 card, and is 3 mana worth that? I don't think it is. Like I would rather my 3 mana get me more mana, or I would rather 3 mana, take care of a problem on my board or further my game plan. But just like I wouldn't. So like comparing this to like Read the Bones or something where you're scrying 2 first and then you're drawing, like is 100 times better because you're potentially looking at 4 cards and. Just like I would value the number of cards that you're looking at way more than just drawing 2 additional cards.
Yeah, I think it opens that bigger conversation about like when you're looking at card draw, where is the line of this is good enough and it's also doing enough other stuff. So Deadly Dispute comes to mind, 1 in a black instant. Draws you 2 cards and makes a treasure. You have to sacrifice a creature or artifact to cast it. But if it synergizes well with what you're doing, it is in every way better than this card. Actually, even gives you a mana advantage if you're sneaky about how you do it. So, and the fact that Quick Study exists and that there's an instant speed version of this card, Like you'll never see a divination again. Where there was definitely a time where if you had blue in your color identity, this was going in the deck just because it drew you 2 cards. And man, when we look at what power creep has done to the game, it killed divination, is what it did.
Yeah, so I will say the only deck that you should see divination or its ilk is it in a storm deck that you're reducing the cost of your instants and sorceries significantly.
Yeah, you need a critical mass of cards that are like this.
Because one mana draw 2 cards is pretty solid. Some would say it's almost as good as Ancestral
it
Ancestral
does feel like
Recall.
it's close to that.
So like if you're reducing the cost constantly, if like your commander is reducing the cost of instants and sorceries, if you're copying instants and sorceries, also seems pretty good. But other than that, like seems kind of dookie to me.
Yep.
So we're flying through this list, aren't we?
We're doing all right.
Anyway, so Tim, what's the next card on the list?
This one is like so the next card's Decimate. It's two a red and a green. It's a sorcery: destroy target artifact, target creature, target enchantment, and target land. So you can't cast, and the newest explanation text on this says you can't cast a spell unless you have legal choices for all its targets, which translates to if one of the targets gets removed, the whole spell fizzles.
That is not true. No. And so it tries to resolve the best as it can. You just can't put it on the stack unless there's all targets.
I see.
So
I see.
So you have to have legal targets for everything. So like, but if someone were to sacrifice like the land or creature or whatever, it would just then destroy the things that it can.
I see.
Yeah.
So, the reason that this just the first half of that you can't cast a spell without the 4 legal targets makes this, for whatever reason, just not as impactful as it once was. This, I think, early on in the days of Commander was red-green removal at its peak. It was the best kind of thing that you could be doing. But at 4 mana, yes, it looks like, oh, I can destroy 4 things, but are there actually 4 things that I want to destroy?
Yep.
I think there was certainly a time where you would look at this card and go, if I'm in red-green color identity, I'm going to include this.
Yep.
But I think what people found is that you there was one item of that 4 that you wanted to destroy, and if you didn't have legal targets for all of the other ones, you couldn't, because you weren't able to even put this on the stack.
Yeah. This used to be in my Windgrace deck because I had that same thought. 4 mana destroys 4 things. However, for like a lot of the times you're not there's not 4 things that you want to destroy. And honestly, having all 4 things out can be surprisingly difficult. So like there's been times where it's like it's sitting in my hand and I just can't cast it because all 4 targets aren't there. So the fact that it's a sorcery also makes it a lot worse, because instant speed removal is king, because you can do it as late as possible, but when you have to do it on your turn, it makes it a whole lot worse. So yeah, I used to love this card. It should say, like, I don't know, this decimating something, you're just destroying, what is it, 10% of things, or is it all that's left is 10%? The actual word decimate.
No, to decimate something is to remove 1/10 of it.
Yeah, so it should just say destroy 1/10 of all permanents, but yeah, that makes math complicated. I think they tried, Wizards. That's why you should hire me.
Yeah, and for a brief moment there, like, it was good, and it was you know,
really good.
I think the trap of this card is that you look at it and you go, I get a 4 for 1. But most of the time, you're targeting each of your opponents with at least one thing. So you're spreading it around. It's not like you're hurting the one person who you need to hurt the most with all of it. You're having to spread it around just because you don't have legal targets.
There's also been times There's been times where I've had to destroy like my own enchantment.
Right.
Like I have an exploration or something. I've had to destroy it so I can get rid of the problem creature and artifact.
So you
And
can
then
remove that creature. So and that's what it comes down to. In green
there's a
red, you don't get a
cost.
lot of just destroy target creature. So this is what I think is attractive about this card, but needing to get those other qualities met makes it very hard to fulfill.
Yeah, it's to the point where I'd rather
All
have just
right.
a beast within and just be able to destroy one thing
That's right.
that's any target for one less mana
That's right.
at instant speed.
And I don't think we're alone in that one. Yeah.
So,
Okay. Moving on. What's next for you?
oh, this is a hot take, people. Now, don't remon me in the comments. You know what? Remon me in the comments because
Or do.
this honestly, I think this card is just actively bad now. There's the card I'm talking about is Cultivate. It is a 3-mana sorcery. It says search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal those cards, and put one of them onto the battlefield tap, and the other into your hand, then shuffle. And the ramp has just gotten so good that 2-mana ramp is just way better. The only time that like I will run a Cultivate is when I have a 5-mana mana value commander, because that guarantees me it on turn 4. The only time that I will run a Cultivate is when it.
I think that's a good qualifier. That makes a lot of sense. Like that there is the spot where this still makes at least some sense. But if you're if you're not, if your commander costs less than that, you really maybe should look at these 3-mana ramp spells. They are just, again, in green, Cultivate, Kadama's Reach.
Yep, Bomb's Reach.
Yeah.
I mean, I like Harrow. That's a 3-mana instant speed mana ramp where you have to sacrifice land. But those 2 lands come into play, but they also come into play untapped.
Right.
So, you kind of like net mana almost in a way. It depends on like how you're tapping it and everything like that. But like there's just like, yes, it replaces the card in your hand, which is kind of nice. I'm not gonna say that's bad about it, but like I can pay 2 mana to get a forest into play untapped. Why would I like pay 3 mana to get one into play and one into my hand? That's tapped. It's very difficult. But yeah, I think this card's actively bad.
I'm glad that it's on the list because it's like this is a great example of what we're talking about today. That there was a time where this would be insane to put this on a list of cards that were cards that maybe we're not considering anymore would have sounded like complete madness. But now with the power level of the game being where it is, this does start to seem like it's just not strong enough to really fit into that spot. There's decks that it's perfect for. Again, sometimes it makes a lot of sense, but it is not the staple that it once was.
No, this used to go in every green deck, and now it only goes in green decks where your commander costs 5, or it should be anyway. Because it guarantees it on turn 4. But like I would even go as far as to say like Sky Shroud Claim for 1 more mana, you're getting 2 forests into play untapped. Is better than Cultivate, than having like, because like the fact that it comes into play tapped means you're not getting that mana until the next turn. I really like to use as much mana as possible every turn if humanly possible, and like I think there's better stuff out there these days. I would even say I would almost rather a 3-mana mana rock that did other things that my deck wants to do over a Cultivate.
Sure.
So Tim, what's the next card on your list?
Next card on my list is a removal spell. It is Hero's Downfall, 1 and 2 black, instant, destroy target creature or planeswalker. So for those who don't know, Hero's Downfall, when it was originally printed, was a rare, and at the time it was the apex murderer. It was so good because it destroys a creature at instant speed, doesn't care what kind of creature it is, black creatures, artifact creatures, doesn't matter. This kills it. And also it can destroy a planeswalker. It was a standard staple, but early on in my commander, experience, I would definitely include this if I was playing black. This was a spot removal spell that really was just versatile enough to be included, and costed well enough that there's no drawback to it. So it seemed like the best fit for that mana value. It has since been downshifted to uncommon,
I see that.
and they have printed other cards that are just strictly speaking better. And so this is why this has become less of an impactful card. And really, like, as far as spot removal goes, it needs to cost very little. It needs to cost 1 or 2, or possibly be free, like Deadly Rollick. But the newest one, here's what I think has put the nail in the grave of Heroes Downfall, and it was just printed. So there is now an MDFC in Modern Horizons 3 called Fell the Profane. And so it is just comes into play tapped black land on one side, but you can pay 3 life and have it come in untapped if you want. So you can get untapped mana out of this if you need to. And in Commander 3 life, not as big a deal as it is in 60 card formats. Fell the Profane's 2/2 black, instant speed, destroy target creature or planeswalker.
2 mana.
So for 1 more mana, you get an MDFC land. I don't think you're ever going to see Heroes Downfall again.
Yeah, so the only time that,
unless you're playing on a budget.
nope. I still don't think you're gonna see it, because, like, let's just put it in perspective. There's just, like, in order for my removal to cost 3, it needs to hit absolutely anything, and Heroes Downfall just doesn't.
And planeswalkers just aren't that relevant.
They can also just be attacked by 3 other players. So, like, you're not
right.
Unless if you're seeing a dedicated Super Friends deck, you, like, might see a planeswalker a game, and that's if you're lucky.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's true, and it's just remarkable to me that, like, I remember thinking, like, Heroes Downfall, here it is, here's the apex of targeted removal in black, and it's just like it's forgotten. It doesn't. Nobody's thinking about it at all anymore.
I almost had to look this card up, like, Heroes Downfall. Like, when I was looking at the list, I was like, Heroes Downfall. Oh, Heroes Downfall. Like, it just was like, right, this card that's really bad now, like, really, really bad, and it's 2 black, so you can't even make it, like, cost, like, 1.
Right, and really we just have, like, Infernal Grasp is 1 and a black and 2 life, destroy target creature, so cheaper, and the life doesn't really matter. Go for the Throat, excludes artifact creatures, but gets anything else for just 1 and a black.
Yeah.
Deadly Rollick is free if you have your commander out.
It seems pretty good.
So, yeah, there's just so many, and as I said, I really think that Fell the Profane at this point, like, just because now I have a land that does this for only a little bit more opportunity cost, just a tiny bit more. And, like, we'll never hear from this one again. Sorry.
And, like, if you're adding colors, you have, like, Anguish Unmaking that just exiles any non-land permanent.
That's right. That's right.
So, yeah.
All right.
Just bad now.
Poor Heroes Downfall. It itself has fulfilled its own destiny, and it is no longer it has experienced its own downfall.
Well, we're gonna get some Wrath in the next section, because Wrath of God is just a bad board wipe. It is a 4 mana 2/2 white. Destroy all creatures that can't be regenerated. It just doesn't do enough. I remember, like, you're like, oh man, I have to run white so I can put Day of Judgment, Wrath of God, and all these other board wipes. But now all these colors have sufficient enough board wipes. And if you're in white, you just have 100 times better board wipe. Like, I'd rather Fumigate, where it costs 1 more mana, but I'm gaining 1 life for each creature. Like,
right.
I just want my board wipes to do more.
So, like, now Sunfall exists, and I know for those who aren't playing Standard out there, you may not be used to this card, but for 1 more mana, you get to exile all creatures, and that's way more backbreaking than this is.
Oh, yeah.
Like, in a format like Commander, where most people have at least some kind of recursion or care about creatures in their graveyard, Sunfall at 1 more mana just makes this look so much worse than it did. And then there's other 4 mana Wraths that don't have the regenerate clause, but do something else, and that is usually marginally better, and the regenerate clause just isn't what it once was. For regenerate hasn't been relevant for a very long
I'm
time.
trying to think the
So
last card that was reprinted with regenerate was
that where it mattered, right?
right.
There's some cards that have like regenerate on them, but they haven't printed it as an ability. And I mean,
A
I
decade
think there was at
probably.
least yeah, it's been a long time. But I mean, I know that there's been like the rare standard set, but I can't even think of one. It's been quite a while.
Yeah, this card just doesn't do enough. Like, um, because the card you're like heroic intervention is a card that everyone has, everyone uses. There's so many cards that just say give all your creatures indestructible until end of turn. That oh, I paid 4 mana and then this person won because they happen to have heroic intervention in their hands. So like, I'd
That's
rather my
right.
board wipes exile if possible.
Hmm.
I'd rather have my board wipe say minus X until end of turn. I would rather have my board wipe say sacrifice all creatures. Why do you like? That's why dude, all is dust. I'd rather pay 3 mana to make everyone sacrifice all their colored permanents. It just
Yeah,
does so much more. The net that
that's
casts is
fair.
so much bigger.
Yep.
Where just destroying creatures isn't enough these days. There's value engines we
Yeah,
need to disrupt.
it just really isn't. And I think that in white, you get options where you can kind of work around whatever strategy that you're running that will allow you to make it more one-sided or at least a little bit lopsided, right?
Right.
If it's not completely symmetrical, you can at least move that needle a little bit. And every white deck that I built, or really deck that has white in it, that's what I've always looked at. I've always looked at, is there a board wipe in here that lines up with what my strategy is so that I'm going to be able to come back from it a little bit better than everybody else, or that, maybe it doesn't affect me at all. And in those cases, those cards are just absolutely better. And very few times have I found myself including this in the final list because I just find board wipes that are more suited with my strategy.
Especially if you're only putting like a maximum of like what 6 in a deck, 7 in a deck. Like there's just strictly better board wipes that I would rather play. So I think I'm gonna be struck by lightning any second now. So we better get moving so we can finish the podcast.
All right, my next card is Knight of the White Orchid. This is 2 white for a 2/2 human knight that has first strike. When it enters the battlefield, if an opponent controls more lands than you, you may search your library for a plains card and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. So you might consider this to be the kind of the granddaddy of a lot of different, creature-based ramp effects in white, where if an opponent has more lands than you, this thing happens. So what I found, as we've said so many times today, I'm not trying to say this is a bad card. What I am trying to say is I have found myself not including this. Maybe because there are things that just feel better. Maybe because I'm not getting it to work as well as I would like it to. It's really conditional on a very specific circumstance. And unless you can orchestrate that circumstance happening, I have just found that this card, it used to be a powerhouse. It
Mhm.
used to be the go-to white ramp, and I have just found myself cutting it more and more often.
Now I don't play white very often, and this is where I'm actually going to give you a little bit of pushback because I think I'm valuing the Tango lands better than I used to because I kind of look at it as I drew a card. Because if you play it on turn 2, you have to discard unless if you played another spell. So I'm valuing bounce lands better than I used to in the past. And this card is amazing with bounce lands specifically because you play your bounce land, you bounce your land, now you're a land behind everyone if everyone's making their land drops, right? And if there's a green player like this, I think I think it's honestly gotten better with the more Tangle lands we get because there's the colorless Tangle lands. There's just more of it. And honestly, I want to play a deck where this will actually work. But the problem is white's not really my cup of tea. white and red are like my
Sure.
two least favorite colors. So like the chances of me playing a Night to White Orchid and getting the value from the bounce lands that I've been valuing more and more as of late. Um, but I
It just still feels like a pretty big hoop or a pretty small hoop to have to jump through rather. Like it feels like you're going a long way to effectively get a ramp spell when you could have played Arcane Signet and gotten
it's true. I'm not.
got so my point is that like that it at some point was absolutely the go-to, and now there's just better options. Now there are
Well,
other
there's
things
so many 2 mana
that
mana rocks out there now these
right.
days.
That's true. The propensity of two mana rocks has increased a lot, but there's also just 2 mana casting cost creatures that have a similar effect to this that aren't 2 white. Because in your Tango Land
Oh, that's
scenario, you're
true.
playing a 2 color deck, where 2 white here makes this one, demonstrably worse than the others. Whereas at this, I just remember like having a play set of these and being like, oh, I got these
I'm
and these are
set
a
for life.
staple and they're gonna be here forever, and now they're worth dirt. And it's just because like and what's amazing about it is kind of a pioneer of those abilities. But as with so many other cards on our list today, old Knight of the White Orchid just ain't what it used to
It
be.
fell off the wayside, huh? Yeah, I mean, you make very valid points, and but I think again, it's one of those things where it's like if you build your deck in a way that it works, this card's going to work very well for you. But like,
Sure.
it's not it goes in every deck that has white. So
That's right.
that makes a lot more sense when you put it in that perspective. So, um, you know,
All right.
I was trying to come up with a flower pun, but I'm losing my joking capabilities here. So I think we'll just get into the next card.
Just go to the next card
We'll just
already.
go to the next card already. So the next card I picked was Utter End. It's a four mana instant that says exile target non-land permanent. It's black, white, and 2 generic. The problem I have with this card is the fact that it costs 4. Like
Yep.
like 4 mana for removal is I'd rather have a board wipe that does the same thing, that just destroys more than just one thing, or exile or permanently remove. Um, I think Anguish Unmaking is just a strictly better version of this card. 1 less mana, yeah, it costs 3 life. Boohoo. We're talking about a format that has 40 life, so yeah, this card just I mean, Vindicate was another popular card that would be in this slot, but that's sorcery speed, so it's not as good anymore. So
And it destroys, which is relevant. I think
right.
what people really liked about this card early on was that it exiled and that it doesn't hurt you. I mean, life is a resource, and I think most folks would agree that that Anguished Unmaking is better. That the 1 less mana and the 3 life add-on is a fair trade, and that we'll take that trade every day and
Oh,
play
of
Anguished
course.
Unmaking. But I think you're right that 4 mana for targeted removal just ends up feeling like too much.
Yeah, I struggle playing 3 mana ones. So like if I'm in this colors, like I would rather play Generous Gifts or something like that than other end. Yes, the exile is really nice, but like I'm not wanting to hold up so much mana. Like
True.
unless if you're a deck that is always going to want to hold up mana, holding up 4 mana is so much. You can do so much with 4 mana that like I'd rather do the thing instead of wait for someone else to have something that I might not need to just exile. So I'd rather further my game plan for 4 mana than
No, I think you're
just
absolutely
sit
right
on
about
four
that. At
mana.
this mana cost, you want to have something that's impacting either more things, or if it's single target removal, it should be cheaper. So at that value, you want to be doing more.
Yeah. Well, that's the utter end of my conversation about this card. So we're gonna go ahead and go to the next one.
We got through the whole card without making a joke about cows.
Moo.
My last card is near and dear to my heart and was probably always a bad card.
I'm starting to
And
think
it's
it was always a bad card.
it's casualties of war. It's two black and two green, total of 6. It's a sorcery. Choose one or more. Destroy target artifact, destroy target creature, destroy target enchantment, destroy target land, destroy target planeswalker. So listen, this is Decimate all over again, except it's modal. So you
It
don't need
doesn't
all
have
the
to,
targets
yeah.
in order to put it on the stack. But we end up running into something of a similar problem. So the problem I run into with this card, or ran into with this card, is that when I got to this, like when I got it, I want it to be a board wipe. Right. I want it to have more of an impact on the board than it does, because it is just one thing. And yes, you can pick apart specific things, but for that mana cost, the slot that I was putting it in the decks I was playing it, I always wanted it to have more of an impact, and it wasn't cleaning up enough of the problems to really move the game in the direction that I wanted. So I was really high on this card when it first came out. If I had black and green in the color combo, you would definitely see this card in there. And lately, it ends up on the cutting room floor because it is not a board wipe. I really want it to be, and
Yeah.
it's not.
Yeah, I could see why you would want this. Like I like the fact that it's modal. You can choose whatever you want. But you're right. Like I'd rather play 6 mana for like an austere command, or like I would rather spend one more mana, or 2 more mana and get to Creepane, where I'm drawing a whole bunch of cards. I could
Right.
potentially cycle it for 5. Like, I mean, but also spending so much mana to destroy only a potential of 5 things, and you're realistically only going to destroy 3 because the land feels bad and you're not really going to see planeswalkers. So,
That's right.
like,
And that's what it came down to. The more I played the card, the more I was like, I'm blowing up 2 things with this card. And that is just not 6 mana worth of value. I need it to do more.
it's not worth
And
6 mana
so
on my turn. So even if this was an
mm-mm.
instant, it would be a little bit better, but I'd still not run it.
Yeah.
So
Poor casualties of war. I really thought it was gonna be a contender, and just not at all.
it was a casualty on our list. So we're gonna go ahead and get
Yeah, of its own war. Yeah. All right.
all right.
What
So
bring us home.
this last card is, I'm actually bringing up the whole cycle of cards. Now, don't get me wrong. There's 2 specifically, maybe 3 specifically, that are really really good in this cycle. But I'm saying the Sword of Cycle. So the one that I'm particularly bringing up is Sword of Fire and Ice. Uh, 2 damage and drawing a card for 5 mana and having to get through to something is just bad. It is just bad. Yes, protection from red and blue are 2 really good colors, but like 5 mana, people, you could do so much with 5 mana. I was complaining about doing so much with 4 mana. Imagine what you can do with 1 additional mana.
It's a
Yes,
$40 card. Why is it still so expensive?
because everyone and their mom that runs a Voltron deck wants to play all of the Sword ofs. And yes, Sword of Fire and Ice is probably, so the 2 that I like the best are Sword and Feast and Famine, Sword of Hearth and Home, and Sword of Forge and Frontier.
Yep.
Those are the 3 that are, yes, they are good. They don't deserve to be on this list. However, Sword of Fire and Ice is probably the best of what's left to like that one's on the cusp of still being good, but there's just so much better equipment out there that you can do with 5 mana or less, that like only +2/+2. Like this equipment was a god when it first came out, because equipment were amazing and new, and this was the rare cycle of this, or the rare equipment of the set. But like, looking at Sword of Light and Shadow, I believe is you gain 3 life and you can return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. That's not good. Yes, black and white are great colors to get protection from.
It's like Healing Salve and Raise Dead.
Seems bad to me.
And
um,
and also this one, it's shock and opt, or some other one blue draw a card thing,
right.
right?
It's
So it's really like one mana effects, but like Feast and Famine untaps all of your lands.
and makes it's a duress and freaking amazing. Like that card doesn't deserve
Yeah.
to be on this, but the other, I guess it would be 7 deserve to be on this list.
No, I'm with you on this one. Insofar as like I have a number of these, and it takes a very specific deck for one of them to go in. I mean, I definitely have the red white equipment deck, so the best of the best of these. I think even this one in particular, the Sword of Fire and Ice, is in there, but it's only because it's a dedicated equipment deck, like because it gets the things out for cheaper and
Yep.
equips them for cheaper. Like that's what it takes to make it feel good, is that you have to reduce all of the different costs in order for it to be something that feels worth playing. But otherwise, other than that, other than something that's dedicated, I don't find myself reaching for these. I have a couple of them sitting around, and I don't put them in decks because it just feels like it takes too long.
I will find that I do find myself reaching if the deck would feel that it would be necessary. Feast and Famine specifically. I find I could still reach for, like, I could
I
reach for
mean,
that and put it in
especially when you're
Indominus Rex
playing
Alpha
ramp.
or something
Yeah,
like that. Like,
I that I mean, because the untap land things feels so much more potent than
right,
almost anything that any of the other swords
right.
do. Untapping all your, like, because like the time that it triggers in the turn makes it incredibly impactful, because it happens during combat. You get all your mana back on your second main phase, so you can dump stuff in the beginning, get the damage in, and what a good example. You can play it, equip it, spend your
And
5 mana
then
doing that,
you
and you
just
get it all back.
it's a time warp
Yeah,
essentially. Yeah.
right. So that one's fantastic, but like that specific text makes it loads better than all the other ones. I wonder what that one is these days, but otherwise, I agree with the sentiment that these cards at one point, especially Fire and Ice, like $40 card, feels really super powerful. I can I have one in my equipment deck, and if I didn't have it in there, I can't imagine where else I would think about putting it. Probably nowhere.
Yeah, because like I mean, it's not even the best protection anymore because like I'd
Mm-mm.
rather have hexproof or indestructible over
That's right.
protection, unless if I'm getting like protection for really really cheap.
Yeah, there's just like, as you pointed out earlier, a lot of the RAS or board wipes that we're playing with these days get around targeting and get around damage. So, I mean, the Fire and Ice saves you from Blasphemous Act, sure, but doesn't save you from Cyclonic Rift.
Oh, so I'm gonna take those two swords to the chest, and it's gonna warm me up and chill me out all at the same time. So, but
Yeah,
I
put those swords away.
yeah, we're gonna put them away. We'll hang them on our wall and make our room look pretty. But other than that,
Yeah.
yeah, other than that, I think they're gonna stay on the wall. So I want to say that's our list, people.
Yeah, that's our list. I'm going to sound a little repetitive here, but remember, like, we're not saying these cards are bad. Lots of them are super fun. Even that last cycle, the swords can be really, really fun in a casual setting. We just find ourselves playing them a lot less today than we did, and that's really what we're getting at today. So many of these cards were favorites of ours, still kind of are. We just don't really end up getting them into our decks anymore. So that's going to wrap us up for today, friends and opponents, and also those folks still waiting for their own personal redemption arc. Thank you so very kindly for joining us on the Head Games Commander podcast. We truly appreciate your support. Remember, you can help out the show by watching our podcast and all our other videos on YouTube, by joining our streams on both YouTube and Twitch, and by hitting those like and subscribe buttons. Links in the description.
but before we scoop things up, we have a question for the think tank. What cards do you think that once loved that you just don't play anymore? Let us know in the comments. And as always, thank you for playing along. Have a wonderful day. Bye.